Welcome to the Writer Reads The Strays of Lunar One, Book 2, The Unwanted, Chapter 5, Finding a Lead. Oliver didn't bother answering. Instead, he pulled himself back to human form and tried not to think of what he'd rather be doing. His wolf paced restlessly behind his eyes, and he didn't dare let it free. Turning slowly, he addressed the guard captain. Where to? The man hadn't lowered his blaster and used it to gesture to the door. Follow me, he instructed, reversing through the opening and into the corridor. Oliver followed, the floor cool against his bare feet. 3 doors down and to the right, followed as Oliver stepped in front of him. It's open? No, I like directing prisoners through locked doors. It's my idea of fun. Sarcasm snarled through the words, and Oliver shrugged. Whatever floats your boat, he replied, finding the door and heading toward it. He hesitated, but it slid open as he reached for the access panel. Releasing a breath of relief, Oliver walked through, taking in the pods set against the wall on either side. Lights flickered on the one on the right, and the readouts showed green. Yours is the one to the left, the guard said from behind him, and Oliver moved to the pod in question. It was the same model as the one Kyton had shipped them out of Lunar One in. He knew it, and hoped this one was better connected than either of those. They'd never find the girl if it wasn't. He popped the lid, tracing his fingers over the data panels and adjusting the controls. The guard nudged him with the muzzle of his blaster. Quit stalling. We'll check it once you're locked down. Oliver stilled. You mind getting that out of my ribs so I can get in without setting it off? The guard snorted softly, but he stepped back, and Oliver was glad the man wasn't privy to what was going through his head. He'd have been shot for sure if the guy picked up exactly how fast Oliver could have disarmed him. His last combat trainer's words rattled through his head as he slid into the pod. If you're going to use your weapon to control the situation, keep it out of grab range. What we're up against will have it out of your hands and down your throat before you can pull the trigger. That had been 3 months before Amshevra, and not nearly long enough for them to prepare for facing Lupari warriors in full battle armor and hybrid form. The settlers hadn't known what they'd been starting, and the mercs? Well, Amshevra had been the company's first contracted battle against the shapeshifters, and those who had faced the wolves before hadn't been able to convey the full meaning of what that was. Amshevra had been as close to a massacre as they were ever likely to face. They'd held the Lupar long enough for Odyssey to prevent a bloodbath, but barely. By then, the settlers who'd faced the shifters in battle and been bitten for their trouble were undergoing the change, and Oliver had been drafted to see them through it. As if an Earth Ware had any idea of how Lupar shifters became what they were, or what the process of human infection entailed. In the end, it hadn't been the Lupar that had ended Oliver's tenure with the company. The company had done that itself when it had chosen to separate the infected from their families, counsel and train them, before auctioning their services to whichever mercenary or militia would take them. Unable to stomach his part in the process, Oliver had left, returning to Lunar One. He and Lewis had been doing okay until the Ravelin screw up. Shaking that thought aside, he slipped out of his fatigues and stepped into the pod. Man, I hope this thing's been properly sanitized, he thought, but he didn't let the thought slow him down. The guard was impatient enough. Oliver figured he didn't need a reason to get any more impatient. Asshole. This time, no static roared through his skull, and Oliver figured Carnelian had the techs in charge of that feed held more tightly than the rest. He had a moment, as the lid locked into place, where he had to fight the urge to throw it open and escape the pod's confines. Taking a breath, he concentrated on relaxing his body. This became harder as the skull cap slid over his head, and easier when the pod's sedative put him under. A moment of disorientation swept over him and he felt himself falling. While part of his head knew he was locked inside a box and not falling anywhere, the part interfacing with the pod's enforced reality lost touch with the fact, and he landed hard. At least that didn't hurt as much as it could have if he'd really made the drop. He landed in a crouch and raised his head, not entirely surprised to find himself in a control room with 2 desks set kitty-corner to each other, an array of screens before them. Lewis spun in his chair and watched as Oliver straightened. Oliver decided to get straight to work. What have you got? Lewis wasn't impressed. Oh, hi, Lewis. How are you? I'm fine. Being beaten half to death. He stopped as Oliver's snarl washed over him, and Oliver swore he saw the man's wolf lay its ears back in return. But no, there's no time for niceties. It's right down to it. Oliver stared at the man. Hi, Lewis. How are you? I'm fine. And he stopped because what he wanted to say next wasn't going to help them. Lewis didn't need to hear Oliver say the beating was his fault. They both knew that was the case, which accounted for his beater's abrasive attitude. Really? Because I'm sorry, and I know that doesn't cut it, but it'll do for a start. But we need to, Oliver began just as Carnelian's voice cut across him. As touching as all this is, the broker interrupted, I don't see how it's finding our missing girl, and the clock is ticking. The clan just got in contact? Oliver asked, because he could think of only one reason the man would be pushing so hard. They got in touch a day ago, the man told him abruptly, just after we put you in a tank with some military-grade nans to speed the process. Oliver's eyes widened, and Lewis paled. You weren't hurt that he was, and he's wasted enough of my time, Carnelian snapped. I'm not a patient man, but my clients make me look like a saint. So quick standing there. So quit standing around before they start demanding my retrieval specialists in lieu of who they really want. Oliver reached for the back of the empty chair, his skin going numb at the threat. He'd like to think Carnelian wouldn't really hand them over, but he knew better. And he'd like to think the Star Shadows wouldn't make a profit from their hides, but he knew better on that score as well. The Star Shadows would be seeking recompense for the delay, and if Aylin was important to anyone in the clan, they'd. His sudden hesitation was noticed. What have you got, Mr. Landstrom? Do we know if Aylin was of special importance to anyone in the clan? I know she's young, but don't the Lupara monitor their bloodlines closely? And if she was born and bred on Actravaran, then. Oh, very good, Mr. Landstrom. I'll have my people look into that. In the meantime, I believe Mr. Havisham has made a little headway. Oliver cocked an eyebrow at Lewis and sank into the chair. You heard the man. I'm fine. I've been stuffed full of military-grade nans. And wouldn't he just love to know where the broker had gotten those? Now, report. The phrase was a trigger the Merc companies used. Some added words to unlock the phrase, but neither Oliver nor Lewis had progressed to that point in their training, and the phrase worked as a trigger on its own. Rennett's World hit the passenger liner she was on. He looked apologetic. Odyssey are going to be digging into where it went, but they're also the reason the liner got hit. It was one of theirs? Yes, and it seems Rennett's World is holding a grudge. That little incident that got the Star Shadows Alpha 9? Odyssey had a team here, and they stumbled on the Star Shadows before they'd taken control. Oliver frowned, but Lewis kept going. The price of getting the team back was rescuing the son of the Star Shadows leader. But they didn't just stop with the cub. They went ahead and rescued a bunch of other hostages as well. That means they also have allies, Oliver pointed out. And not just amongst the Lupari, Lewis replied. They rescued some missing Odyssey agents. Human? As well as a contingent of Vespers and another wolf hunt pack. That piqued Oliver's interest. Whose? Lewis shook his head. I didn't find out. They joined the Star Shadows after the battle for independence. Let me guess, Oliver said. The Star Shadows demanded Odyssey fight there, too. You got it, but get this. Those mercs? They had to rescue the Star Shadow cub a second time, and the girl was with him. With the mercs? No, with the cub. Well, there's your link then. Apparently, Carnelian hadn't gone very far, because he intervened once more. I sincerely hope you didn't just say what I thought you did. That the son of the Star Shadows clan leader has a personal interest in the missing girl, Oliver retorted, because I think that's the conclusion we just came to, and it's not what I hoped. Oh, Mr. Carnelian sounded intrigued. And what was it you wanted to find out? For a man who'd just discovered that his entire business, his life, and the lives of everyone he was in contact with or cared about were under threat, Nattl's leader was taking the news very calmly. Because the prices on your heads is enough to dig me out of most of that, the broker told him, revealing just how deep the scrape went outside his implant. Oliver answered the question he'd asked as if the revelation hadn't horrified him. I was hoping to find a third party that might have had an interest in the girl, rather than a feud that's half a decade old and probably too well entrenched to ever get old. Yes, well, now you know, Mr. Carnelian told him. Thank you for uncovering the stakes. He didn't sound particularly grateful, and Oliver didn't blame him. If he and Lewis had been in the businessman's shoes. Oh, wait, we are, he thought. Only our predicament is a little worse. Carnelian didn't respond to that, so Oliver tapped into the computer. What are you doing? The broker asked a few minutes later. Oliver hesitated, glancing over at Lewis. Looking up the Alpha 9 Battle for Independence, there has to be a record somewhere. Lewis spun back to his console, and silence followed. Carnelian, if he was interested in what they were doing, was staying out of their way and letting them do it. But Oliver was sure he could feel the man's presence as they worked. It was distracting. And just like that, the presence and the sense of someone looking over their shoulders left. Oliver breathed a sigh of relief, but he didn't let that distract him from what he needed to do. Jackpot, Lewis whispered a few moments later and sent him 2 files. Jackpot indeed, Carnelian murmured when Oliver opened them. Oliver put the files onto the screen and discovered Lewis had taken the next step. Having uncovered several articles on the battle, Lewis had highlighted a half-dozen pictures. Not only did they show massive ants fighting some kind of giant spider, but they showed giant wasps flying overhead, as well as a small force of mercenaries. The next set of articles Lewis had dug up didn't come from the news reports on Alpha 9, but from a human news agency in a distant quadrant, where a colony startup had agreed to establish a 3-nation rulership triad in return for assistance from its 2 partners. Axis 58 now stood on the frontier of potential Arak invasion. Arak? Oliver wondered, digging into the publicly available information. Oh. Odyssey's involved too, he stated, noting the company's sponsorship. He frowned at the screen. I thought you said she was kidnapped from a passenger liner. That's what I was told. Now Mr. Carnelian sounded as puzzled as Oliver felt. Oliver remembered the change in scent and decided to push it. But not for training on Actravaran. He tensed, half expecting pain. No, Mr. Carnelian admitted, but her duties were unspecified. Oliver sat and stared at the screen, then turned to Lewis. Do you know if she was on board the liner when it was hit? Lewis stilled. Axis 58, you said. Oliver nodded, and Lewis rattled the keyboard. Oliver continued his study of the battle for independence, widening his research to encompass the ships docked at the Alpha 9 orbital at the same time, as well as those in system. There weren't many. In fact, just before the battle, there weren't any, as most of the luxury craft owned by the planet's feuding ruling class had left. A late arrival had been struck by missile fire from the planet and docked for emergency repairs. Oliver frowned. That ship hadn't left until after the Star Shadows had been given ownership, and then it had left in the company of 2 Odyssey cruise liners. What had they been doing in system? He dug further, hacking his way into the archive storage center where the orbital's logs and security footage was stored. The battle cruisers he could understand, but the cruise liners? Oliver's eyebrows rose as he read. Well, that's interesting. So, Odyssey aren't stupid enough to sell tickets to a planetary takeover, he snapped. And they had battleships in system when the planet was taken. Well, hello. What is it? Oliver asked, wondering what he'd missed. Have you ever heard of the Shady Marie? Mr. Carnelian asked. Oliver shook his head. The records say they're a small merc outfit. No, well, yes, they are a small merc outfit, but they almost work hand in glove on projects Odyssey later shows interest or involvement in, and usually both. Mr. Carnelian sounded intrigued, and they were here and instrumental in the cub's retrieval. The pictures on Oliver's monitor flashed as their employer pulled up the images Lewis had found of the battle. There, he said, and Oliver saw the figure of a large man outlined in blue. That is one Mackenzie's star, the captain of the Shady Marie. The pictures flickered again, stopping on one that showed the picture of a female soldier wielding dual blades attacking one of the Arak. She had to be in there somewhere, Carnelian stated with satisfaction. She is never very far from her captain. Who? The girl is Jocelyn Cutter, but that is not what is important. What is important is that where the Shady Marie goes, Odyssey is not far behind. So your theory that Rennets are holding a grudge gives me some motive. His attention turned to Lewis. Run a search. See if the Shady Marie has visited Kakavor or Axis 58 anywhere in the last 8 years. Highlight any visits post the battle for independence. Those Vespers had to have needed a ride home, and if Rennets are hitting Odyssey projects and the girl wasn't on the liner, then she's either there and under threat or she's there and in danger of being taken. But wouldn't the Shadows know? Oliver asked. Good point, Mr. Landstrom, but it doesn't matter. That is where the trail ends. You can continue your research en route.